stabilize your joints and maintain a good posture if you're hypermobile is the subject of this video. I will be providing you some of the clues and attention spots that you need to be focusing on, and some of the tools necessary for you to really build what it takes to have a more stable posture. And finally, give you one important tip that you need to keep in mind for stability of your joints and or your posture and more. So first of all, when it comes to stability of your joints and a stronger posture, there are certain things that are not happening as a result of your hypermobility and the laxity of your ligaments. You already know that, so we won't be talking about why the ligaments are lax. But one thing that I, as a biomechanical clinician, working with many hypermobile individuals, working on their stability of their posture using developmental kinesiology, developmental exercises, do observe, very unique to the zebra community, is the fact that number one, the breathing is not being done correctly. So clearly you're breathing, but you're not breathing biologically. At the end of this video, I'll be putting down the video on how to breathe biologically. But let's go back to what we're talking about. When it comes to the areas we have of transitional areas, which an average non-bendy individual has 3 transitional areas: vocal diaphragm, abdominal diaphragm, and pelvic diaphragm. What I do observe with my bendy patients is that there is more transitional areas, sometimes 4, sometimes 7 or 8, depending on the degree of bendiness. So while these 3 areas that I mentioned are the standard transitional areas, where, for example, your mid-back becomes your lower back, that transitional area is a very important area. In a bendy individual, I see very common to have vocal diaphragm, abdominal diaphragm, and somewhere in the middle portion of the middle to lower portion of the upper back or mid-back, there is another transitional area. So it's very easy to lose that connection between the transitional areas, so that becomes another area where you become unstable and lose the stability, lose your posture, and then anything and everything that's going to be used to bring back you into a balance gets used, and that can turn into a subluxation of those joints if you have a tendency to keep going there and using those areas. So transitional areas are very, there are more number of transitional areas in the bendy than the normie. How to know where those transitional areas are is really, it's not easy for a person who doesn't know what they're looking at to find them. I just gave you the region. So one in this area, one a little bit lower than your neck, but higher than your abdominal diaphragm, and then multiple ones in the mid back to the pelvic diaphragm area. So that's where a lot of movements like this or side or rotations take place. So when you go to a rehab clinician that knows what they're looking at and knows the bendy population, they can point it out, and those become the focus of stability and focus of attention when we're working on the correction of these things. So the next thing that we want to think about is the positioning of the neck over the perineum and the positioning of the ball of the hip joint over the bump of your ankle. So the ball, when you're standing up, so I'm going to step back here a little bit. When you're standing, the ball of your hip, so place your hands on the ball of your hip, and the bump in your ankles, if you don't see it, put something like a mineral ice or something that's got a little bit of, I'm gonna call it spiciness. So your brain sees where that bump is. And when you put your hands on the bump of your hips, your brain sees that too. So then you can see in your head if they're lining up or not. So typically, this is the presentation where you're behind or you're too far forward. Too far forward is a very common presentation, and that's what the hyperextension of the knees come into play. So we want to look at, in our head, we really want to know where the ball is, where the bump is, and where our knee ends up being. So this will help you in not hyperextending your knees as much, proprioceptively speaking. That was a tongue twister. And so that's a very good beginning of what it takes to really start stabilizing your joints, not providing opportunities for the joints to sublux or for you to become more unstable. So we learned the positions, the tendencies of the transitional areas. We understood the importance of breathing. Your breathing, when done correctly, it's like an inner tubing inside of you, so it's not as easy for your body parts at the transitional areas or not to really twist and go side to side. I'm overdoing this, but you get the point. So the positioning of the plumb line that I mentioned that, and a lot of times, not a lot of times, always with my bendy patients, I really encourage them to lay down on the floor and try to really see their body parts touching them, like I said, mineralized stuff like that, just to really try to see it in the head. There is a map of your body parts in your head. The less you use your body parts, the lighter and less clear that body part map in the brain becomes. So when it comes to using mechanics to engage movement or stability of any kind, that map is used, and if you're not using your body part, the map does not call for that body part, and that is part of the problem. And like I promised you at the beginning, the number one thing for you to remember that despite whatever it is that you're doing, there are days that you may be more bendy than not. And you need to honor that, and you need to understand that those are the days putting a brace on and limiting the level of activity. I'm not saying don't move, I'm saying limiting it is very important. For example, from my experience, I see that ovulation and or menstruation are more bendy days. So those are the times that my patients with, let's say, chronic SI joint pain or chronic shoulder pain or whatever the case may be, I tell them, put the brace on, put the sacral belt on, and that's not a day to go on a hike, for example. So I just want to bring that to your attention. This is very important, and I'm glad that you're watching this. I want to make sure you subscribe to my channel and follow me on my social media for a lot more videos on tips and alerts and techniques that I hope you find beneficial. Thanks for watching.